B. The Industrial Revolution in 18th century Britain, Agricultural Revolution and Enclosure Movement. Introduction. The Industrial Revolution, which began in Britain in the late 18th century, marked a fundamental shift in economic, social, and technological paradigms. While often associated with steam engines, textile factories, and ironworks, the revolution's foundations were laid in the countryside. Central to this transformation were the Agricultural Revolution and the Enclosure Movement, which dramatically altered rural society and created the conditions necessary for industrialization. These two phenomena boosted agricultural productivity, reshaped land ownership, and freed up labor for the burgeoning industries in urban centers. 1. The Agricultural Revolution. Foundations of industrial growth. The Agricultural Revolution in Britain, roughly spanning the 17th to early 19th centuries, was a period of significant agricultural development, characterized by innovations in farming techniques and increased productivity. This transformation was not a single event, but a cumulative process that supported a growing population and laid the groundwork for industrial labor supply. Key features of the Agricultural Revolution. 1. Crop rotation systems. One of the most significant changes was the introduction of the four-field crop rotation system, pioneered in part by Charles Townshend. The traditional method of leaving fields fallow every few years to restore soil fertility was replaced by a more efficient system of rotating crops such as wheat, barley, turnips, and clover, which maintained soil health and increased yields. 2. Selective breeding of livestock. Innovators like Robert Bakewell introduced selective breeding to produce stronger, healthier, and more productive livestock. Breeding techniques led to the development of larger sheep and cattle, which provided more meat, wool, and milk, supporting a growing urban population. 3. New agricultural tools and technology. The mechanization of agriculture began with tools like Jethro Tull's seed drill 1701, which allowed for more efficient planting. This replaced the traditional hand broadcasting method, leading to higher germination rates and less seed waste. Other improvements included the mechanical threshing machine, iron plows, and improved drainage systems. 4. Increased productivity and surplus. Thanks to these innovations, British agriculture became far more productive. Fewer workers were needed on farms, and surplus food supported population growth and urbanization. The rising productivity also helped stabilize food prices and reduce the risk of famine. B. Economic and social impacts. Food security and population growth. With better nutrition and food availability, the population of Britain increased significantly, rising from about 6 million in 1750 to over 9 million by 1801. Labor mobility. As fewer workers were required in agriculture, rural laborers were freed to seek work in emerging industrial sectors. Capital formation. Profits from agricultural improvements were often reinvested in industrial enterprises, further stimulating economic transformation. 2. The Enclosure Movement restructuring rural Britain. Running parallel to the Agricultural Revolution was the Enclosure Movement, a process by which open fields and common lands were consolidated into individually owned farms. Enclosure transformed the landscape and social structure of rural Britain and was a major factor in the rise of capitalism and industrialization. Historical background. In medieval England, agricultural land was largely held in the form of open fields and commons, where peasants and smallholders could graze animals, gather wood, and cultivate crops. However, from the 16th century onward, landowners began enclosing these areas, consolidating strips of land into larger, more efficient holdings. The process accelerated in the 18th and 19th centuries, particularly after the passage of numerous enclosure acts by the British Parliament. These acts legalized the privatization of common lands and were often facilitated through local agreements or enforced by law. B. Reasons for enclosure. Increased efficiency. Larger, enclosed farms were more efficient and profitable, allowing landowners to implement modern farming methods. Rising demand. The growing population and urban markets created higher demand for food and wool, prompting landowners to maximize output. Capitalist agriculture enclosure supported a shift from subsistence farming to market-oriented capitalist agriculture. C. Social and economic effects. On displacement of small farmers. Many smallholders and tenant farmers were unable to compete with larger landowners or afford the costs associated with enclosure. They lost access to common lands and were often forced to sell their plots or become wage laborers. 2. Rise of the landed gentry and agrarian capitalists. Enclosure concentrated land in the hands of fewer, wealthier individuals, creating a class of large-scale commercial farmers. These landowners wielded significant economic and political power, reinforcing class divisions in rural society. 3. Migration to urban centers. The displacement of rural populations contributed directly to rural-to-urban migration, as former farmers sought employment in cities. This migration provided the industrial sector with a vital labor force, especially in textile factories, mines, and ironworks. 4. Resistance and social tensions. Enclosure was not without controversy. In many areas, rural communities resisted enclosure through petitions, riots, and sabotage. The movement was perceived by many as an injustice that disrupted traditional rights and communal life. 3. Interconnection with the Industrial Revolution. The agricultural revolution and enclosure movement were critical enablers of Britain's early industrialization. Their combined effects created the demographic, economic, and social conditions necessary for industrial growth. Population growth and urbanization. Increased agricultural output supported a growing population, which in turn provided both a larger domestic market for industrial goods and a labor force for new factories. B. Capital accumulation. Profits from efficient farming and land consolidation often funded industrial ventures. Landowners and entrepreneurs invested in canals, railroads, machinery, and factories. C. Labor supply. Enclosure and agricultural mechanization displaced many rural workers, who then became the proletariat, the working class essential for industrial production. D. Market-oriented economy. Both developments fostered a shift from subsistence to market-oriented production, aligning with broader capitalist dynamics that characterized the Industrial Revolution. 4. Long-term consequences. The legacy of the agricultural and enclosure revolutions was profound and complex. Positive outcomes: increased agricultural productivity, enhanced food security, acceleration of industrialization, urban development, capital formation for investment. Negative consequences: disruption of traditional rural communities, landlessness and poverty among former commoners, exacerbation of class divisions, environmental changes due to intensified farming.